The notification came through my secure phone while I was cleaning my rifle in the barracks at Camp Arifjan. A simple text from my neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, back in Cedar Falls, Iowa. "Honey, I'm so sorry about what happened today. I tried to stop them, but your mother said you gave permission. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you." I stared at the screen, sand still gritty under my fingernails from our morning patrol, confusion washing over me like the desert heat. What was she talking about? I hadn't given anyone permission for anything. I was 3,000 miles away in Kuwait, 6 months into my deployment, counting down the days until I could return to my little rental house on Maple Street, to my grandmother's antique furniture, to the piano I'd been paying off since I enlisted. My hands were shaking as I called Mrs. Patterson, the satellite connection crackling with static. The elderly woman who'd watched my house and collected my mail sounded like she'd been crying. "Oh, sweetie, they had trucks and everything, professional movers. Your mother, your brother Danny, even your sister Rachel was there directing traffic. They said you were behind on bills and needed to sell everything to pay debts before you came home." The words hit me like shrapnel. Debts? What debts? My military pay went directly into my account, my rent was auto-paid, and I'd been living off base rations for months specifically to save money. I'd never been more financially stable in my life. What did they take? My voice came out smaller than I intended. "Everything, honey. The piano, your grandmother's dining set, the bookshelf with all your college textbooks, your winter clothes, even that hope chest your grandmother left you. They cleaned the place out completely. Said they were doing you a favor, getting rid of your burdens while you were away." I sat in stunned silence in my desert camouflage, surrounded by the beige walls of my temporary home, while my real home was being systematically stripped bare by the people who were supposed to love me, the people I was defending their right to live freely, while I slept on a cot and ate MREs in 120-degree heat. My family had never supported my decision to enlist. When I'd walked across the stage at Iowa State with my nursing degree, they'd expected me to settle down, get married, maybe work at the local hospital like a good girl should. Instead, I joined the Army as a combat medic, wanting to serve something bigger than Cedar Falls, bigger than their small-town expectations. "Maya's just going through a phase," my mother had told relatives at my deployment ceremony. "She'll get this military nonsense out of her system and come home ready to settle down properly." My brother Danny had been worse. "Why do you want to go play war when you could be making real money as a nurse? You're just running away from responsibility." This from a man who'd been living in our mother's basement for 3 years, contributing nothing but empty beer cans and dirty laundry. My sister Rachel had simply rolled her eyes whenever I talked about my service. "Maya always has to be different, always has to be the center of attention. Now she thinks she's some kind of hero." None of them had written me a single letter since I'd been deployed. Not one care package, not one email asking how I was doing or if I needed anything. While I was treating wounded soldiers and civilian casualties, patching up lives torn apart by roadside bombs, they were back home living their comfortable lives and apparently plotting to destroy mine. I called my mother that night, my voice steady despite the rage building in my chest. "Mom, Mrs. Patterson said you cleaned out my house today." "Oh, Maya, honey, yes!" Her voice was bright, cheerful, like she'd just done me the biggest favor in the world. "We found all those bills piling up and we knew you'd be so stressed about it when you got home. Danny had this brilliant idea to auction everything off and pay your debts. We've been planning it for weeks." "What bills? What debts?" "My account is current on everything." "Well, we found those credit card statements, and Danny said military people always get in over their heads financially. It's better to start fresh, don't you think? Clear slate and all that." My blood ran cold. What credit card statements? "The ones for that furniture store and the piano company. Thousands and thousands of dollars, Maya. We were shocked. We had no idea you'd gotten yourself into such trouble." Those weren't debts. Those were payment records. I'd been paying off my grandmother's antique dining set and my piano in monthly installments, building credit and equity. The statements showed payments made, balances going down, not mounting debt. But my family had seen numbers and dollar signs and decided they knew better. Did it occur to you to ask me first? To maybe call and check before you auctioned off everything I own? Oh, honey, we tried calling, but you never answer. And Danny said military people are too proud to ask for help. We wanted to surprise you, take care of everything while you were away so you could come home to a fresh start. Too proud to ask for help. From a family that had never offered help, only judgment. From people who thought my service was a phase and my independence was a character flaw. Where's my stuff now? Well, Danny found this auction company and they gave us a really good deal. Cash on the spot for everything. The piano alone got $800. Can you believe it? And your grandmother's china set went for $300. We put all the money in savings for you. $800? For a piano worth $4,000 that I'd been paying on for 2 years? $300 for a china set that was a family heirloom, irreplaceable and priceless? They'd sold my entire life for yard sale prices and thought they were doing me a favor? I want the money transferred to my account immediately, and I want the contact information for whoever bought my things. Maya, there's no need to be upset. We were helping. And honestly, some of that old furniture was so outdated anyway. When you get married and settle down properly, you'll want new things, modern things. When I get married and settle down properly, there it was again. The assumption that my military service was temporary, that my independence was just a detour on the path to becoming what they thought I should be. I'm not upset, Mom. I'm furious.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you're enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
You had no right to touch my belongings. None. We're your family, Maya. Of course we have the right to help when you're in trouble. I wasn't in trouble. I was serving my country, and you repaid that service by stealing everything I own. The line went quiet for a long moment. Then my mother's voice came back, colder now. Don't be so dramatic, Maya. It's just stuff. Things don't matter when family is looking out for you. Just stuff. My grandmother's piano where she'd taught me to play hymns every Sunday after church. The dining table where I'd done my homework every night through high school and college. The hope chest filled with quilts she'd made by hand, each one a piece of family history. The textbooks I'd kept from nursing school, planning to use them when I continued my education after my service. Just stuff. To them, maybe. To me, it was everything that connected me to who I was before the uniform. Everything that would help me remember home when I built a new life after my deployment. I have to go, Mom. I'll call you when I figure out how to fix this. Maya, wait. Don't be angry with us. We love you. Love. They called this love? Selling my belongings without permission? Making financial decisions about my life without consulting me? Dismissing my anger as drama? If this was love, I was better off as an orphan. I hung up and sat in the darkness of my barracks room, surrounded by the sounds of a military base winding down for the night. Generators humming, distant conversations in languages I was still learning, the occasional helicopter overhead. These sounds had become more familiar than the ones from home, more comforting than my mother's voice. Tomorrow, I would start making calls, trying to track down my belongings, trying to undo the damage my family had done in the name of helping me. But tonight, I sat with the realization that I was more alone than I'd ever been, and the people who should have had my back had stabbed me in it instead. I was a soldier, trained to handle combat and crisis, but nothing had prepared me for this particular battlefield. Nothing had trained me to fight a war against the people who shared my DNA but clearly didn't share my values. The desert wind picked up outside, rattling the windows of my temporary home, and I made myself a promise. When I got home, things were going to change. I was done being the family disappointment who could be managed and controlled from a distance. I was done letting them treat my choices like mistakes that needed to be corrected. I was a United States Army medic, trusted with lives and trained to make split-second decisions under pressure. It was time my family learned to treat me like the capable adult I'd become, not the confused girl they remembered. But first,
I had to figure out how to get my life back from people who thought they had the right to sell it. The next morning came too early, like all mornings in the desert. I'd barely slept, my mind racing through everything I'd lost and every legal option I might have. During our pre-patrol briefing, I could barely focus on the mission details. Sergeant Williams noticed my distraction immediately. "Sergeant Rodriguez, you with us today?" Sergeant Williams asked, his weathered face creased with concern. "You look like you've seen a ghost." After the briefing, I approached him privately. Sergeant Williams had been in the Army for 15 years, had seen 3 deployments, and had become something of a father figure to those of us far from home. If anyone would know what to do, it would be him. "Sarge, I need some advice. My family sold all my belongings while I'm deployed. Everything. Without my permission." His expression darkened immediately. "What do you mean sold everything?" I explained the whole situation while he listened, his jaw getting tighter with each detail. When he finished, he was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the dusty landscape beyond our base perimeter. "Rodriguez, that's not just a family problem. That's theft. That's exploitation of a deployed service member. And there are laws specifically designed to protect soldiers from exactly this kind of situation." He pulled out his phone and started scrolling through contacts. "You need to talk to JAG immediately. Judge Advocate General Corps handles legal issues for military personnel. This is their specialty." Within an hour, I was sitting across from Captain Sarah Chen in the Judge Advocate General office, a small air-conditioned trailer that served as our legal headquarters. Captain Chen was a sharp woman in her early 30s, with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, and a reputation for taking on cases that other lawyers might consider too complicated. "Tell me everything from the beginning," she said, pulling out a legal pad and pen. "Don't leave out any details, no matter how small they seem." I recounted the entire story again, this time taking notes as Captain Chen asked specific questions about timelines, documentation, and the exact nature of what had been taken. Her expression grew more serious with each answer. "Maya, what your family did violates several federal laws designed to protect service members. The Service Members Civil Relief Act specifically prohibits certain actions against deployed military personnel without court approval. But more importantly, what they did constitutes theft and possibly fraud." She leaned forward, her voice taking on a prosecutorial edge. "Did you give them power of attorney? Any written permission to handle your affairs?" "Nothing. I never signed anything giving them permission to touch my belongings or make financial decisions on my behalf." "And you're current on all your bills? No outstanding debts that would justify their actions?" "My finances are completely in order. I can provide bank statements, payment histories, everything. I've never been more financially stable in my life." Captain Chen made more notes, then looked up at me with something that might have been anger on my behalf. "Maya, what your family did violates several federal laws. They engaged in theft, possibly mail fraud, if they opened any of your financial documents, and they violated federal protections for deployed service members. This isn't a civil matter anymore. This is criminal." The words hit me like a physical blow. Criminal. My own family had committed crimes against me while I was serving overseas, while I was risking my life to protect the freedoms they enjoyed. They were back home systematically destroying my life and breaking federal law to do it. What are my options? Several. First, we can file charges through the proper civilian authorities.
Iowa has strong laws about theft and fraud. Second, we can invoke the Service Members Civil Relief Act to void any sales they made without proper authorization. And third, we can pursue civil remedies to recover your property or its full value. Captain Chen stood up and began pacing, her legal mind clearly working through possibilities. But here's what I want to do first. I want to contact your family directly and explain exactly what laws they've broken and what consequences they're facing. Sometimes civilians don't understand the federal protections that exist for deployed service members. They might be more cooperative when they realize they could be looking at prison time. Prison time.
The thought of my mother or Danny or Rachel behind bars should have bothered me more than it did. Instead, I felt a cold satisfaction that someone in authority was finally taking this seriously, finally treating the violation of my rights as the crime it was. How long will this take? Depends on how cooperative they are. If they're smart, they'll start making phone calls immediately to try to undo what they've done. If they're stubborn or think they can ride this out, then we'll proceed with formal charges. Captain Chen pulled out another form and began filling it out. I'm also going to contact the auction company they used. If they purchase goods from people who had no legal right to sell them, those sales are void. The buyers will have to return your property, and the auction company could face charges for handling stolen goods. My heart jumped. You mean I might get my things back? Not just money, but the actual items? It's possible, especially items with sentimental value like family heirlooms. Courts are generally sympathetic to service members who've been victimized while deployed, and they understand that some things can't be replaced with money. For the first time since receiving Mrs. Patterson's text, I felt something other than rage and betrayal. I felt hope. Maybe my grandmother's piano could be recovered. Maybe the dining set where I'd learned to do homework and eaten family meals could come home. Maybe the quilt in my hope chest, each one stitched with love and family history, weren't lost forever. What do you need from me? Documentation. Bank statements showing your financial stability, copies of your lease and payment history, any records you have of the items that were taken. Photos would be helpful too, especially for valuable or unique pieces. I nodded, already mentally cataloging what I could provide. I have photos of everything. I documented all my belongings for insurance purposes before I deployed. Perfect. That shows premeditation and responsibility on your part, which will look good to a judge. It also establishes the value of what was stolen. Captain Chen finished filling out her form and looked up at me with an expression that was equal parts professional determination and personal anger. Maya, I want you to understand something. What happened to you is not uncommon, unfortunately. Family members sometimes see deployment as an opportunity to take advantage of service members who can't protect their interests from overseas. But it's always illegal, and it's always wrong. She stood up and extended her hand for a firm handshake. I'm going to make some calls this afternoon. By tomorrow, your family is going to understand exactly what they've done and what their options are for fixing it. And Maya, you're not alone in this. The entire legal system is designed to protect you from exactly this situation. Walking back to my barracks after the meeting, I felt different. The helpless anger was still there, but now it was joined by something else. Purpose, direction, the knowledge that I wasn't just a victim of family betrayal, but a service member whose rights had been violated by people who clearly didn't understand the legal protections that existed for deployed soldiers. My secure phone buzzed with a text from Danny. Mom says you're upset about us helping you with your debt problem. Don't be dramatic. We'll send you the money when you get home. I stared at the message, marveling at his complete lack of understanding about what he'd done. Still calling it help, still dismissing my response as drama, still treating me like a child who couldn't manage her own affairs. Instead of responding with the angry message I wanted to send, I forwarded the text to Captain Chen. Evidence. Documentation of their continued belief that they'd done nothing wrong. Proof that they still didn't understand the gravity of their actions or the legal consequences they were facing. Tomorrow, Captain Chen would start making calls. Tomorrow, my family would learn that stealing from a deployed service member wasn't just morally wrong, it was a federal crime. Tomorrow, they would discover that their daughter and sister wasn't the helpless child they remembered, but a United States Army medic with the full power of military legal protection behind her. But tonight, I sat in my barracks room with a different feeling than I'd had the night before. Tonight, I wasn't alone with my anger and betrayal. Tonight, I had allies, advocates, and the certainty that justice was coming. My family had taught me something valuable about who I could trust and who I couldn't. They'd shown me that blood doesn't always mean loyalty, and love doesn't always mean respect. But they'd also inadvertently introduced me to people who would fight for me when they wouldn't fight for themselves. Captain Chen was probably working late into the night preparing legal documents and researching case law. Sergeant Williams had checked on me twice since our conversation, making sure I was handling everything okay. Mrs. Patterson, a woman who owed me nothing, had tried to stop the auction and felt bad enough to cry when she called me. These people understood something my family didn't. They understood that service means sacrifice, that deployment means vulnerability, and that a soldier overseas deserves protection, not exploitation. They understood that taking advantage of someone who's serving their country isn't helping. It's betraying everything that service represents. The desert wind was picking up again, but this time it sounded different. Not lonely or isolating, but cleansing, like it was carrying away the last of my illusions about my family and making room for the difficult but necessary work of holding them accountable for what they'd done. Tomorrow would bring phone calls and legal documents and probably more angry conversations with people who still didn't understand what they'd cost me. But tomorrow would also bring the beginning of justice and the first steps towards getting my life back. Captain Chen called me at 0800 hours the next morning, her voice crisp and professional, but with an undertone of satisfaction that made my heart race. Maya, I spent yesterday afternoon making some very interesting calls. Are you somewhere you can talk privately? I stepped outside the communications tent where I'd been checking emails, finding a quiet spot near the perimeter fence where the morning sun was already promising another scorching day. What did you find out? Well, first, I contacted the auction house your brother used. Turns out they have some very strict policies about proof of ownership, policies they completely ignored in your case. When I explained that the items were sold without the owner's consent by people with no legal authority, their tune changed very quickly.
The auction house is now facing potential charges for handling stolen property. They've agreed to provide full buyer information for all your items and are offering to facilitate returns. They also mentioned something interesting about your brother's behavior during the sale. What kind of behavior? According to the auction manager, Danny was extremely pushy about getting everything sold immediately. He refused to provide proper documentation of ownership and became hostile when they asked questions. He also insisted on cash payment only, which raised red flags they should have acted on. The image of Danny bullying auction workers into accepting stolen property without proper documentation made my stomach turn. This wasn't some misguided family intervention. This was calculated theft, executed with the kind of aggressive determination that suggested he knew exactly what he was doing. But here's where it gets really interesting, Captain Chen continued. I called your mother yesterday evening to explain the legal situation. The conversation was quite enlightening. I braced myself for whatever revelation was coming next. Maya, your mother had no idea about the auction, none whatsoever. The words hit me like a physical blow. What do you mean? According to her, Danny told her he was going to organize your belongings and put them in storage until you returned. She gave him the spare key to help with what she thought was a caring gesture. She only found out about the sale when I called her yesterday. My mind reeled. Danny had lied to our mother, manipulated her into giving him access to my house, then systematically sold everything I owned while letting her believe he was protecting my belongings. The betrayal had layers I hadn't even imagined. She's furious, Maya, absolutely furious. She spent the night calling Danny and Rachel, trying to understand how this happened without her knowledge. Apparently, there was quite a family confrontation. I could picture it. My mother, who might have been dismissive of my military service but had never been intentionally cruel, discovering that her son had used her to steal from her deployed daughter. The guilt and anger she must have felt, realizing she'd been manipulated into enabling theft. What about the money from the sales? Captain Chen's voice took on a grimmer tone. That's where things get complicated. Your mother expected Danny to put the money in savings for you, as he'd promised. Instead, he used it to pay off his own debts. Credit cards, back rent to your mother, money he owed to various people around town. The entire proceeds from your belongings went to covering Danny's financial problems. The full scope of the betrayal was staggering. Danny hadn't just stolen my belongings out of some misguided belief that he was helping me. He'd orchestrated an elaborate scheme to convert my property into cash to solve his own financial crisis, manipulating our mother in the process and lying to everyone involved. Where does this leave us legally? Danny is facing multiple federal charges: mail fraud for opening your financial documents, theft of property belonging to a deployed service member, and violation of the Service Member Civil Relief Act. Rachel's involvement was minimal. She apparently just helped load furniture thinking she was helping with storage. But Danny could be looking at serious prison time. Prison time for my brother.
The reality of it should have bothered me more, but all I felt was a cold satisfaction that his actions were finally catching up with him. He'd gambled that I was too far away to stop him and too powerless to fight back. He'd bet wrong on both counts. I've also been in contact with several of the buyers from the auction. Your grandmother's piano was purchased by a local music teacher named Mrs. Henderson. When I explained the situation, she immediately offered to return it. She said she could never enjoy playing something that had been stolen from a deployed soldier. Tears sprang to my eyes before I could stop them. She's willing to give it back? Not just willing, insistent. She's also spreading the word to other buyers about what really happened. Several of them are contacting me directly to arrange returns. Apparently, the idea of owning stolen property from a service member doesn't sit well with most decent people. The dining room set had been bought by a young couple furnishing their first home. The hope chest went to an elderly man who collected antiques. My grandmother's china service was purchased by a woman who ran a bed and breakfast. One by one, Captain Chen told me about buyers who were horrified to learn they'd unknowingly purchased stolen goods and were eager to make things right. What's the timeline for getting everything back? Most items should be returned within the next 2 weeks. The buyers are being incredibly cooperative, and several have expressed interest in making donations to military support charities as a way of apologizing for inadvertently participating in this situation. The kindness of strangers who owed me nothing was overwhelming. People I'd never met were going out of their way to right a wrong they hadn't committed, while my own brother had systematically destroyed my life for his own financial gain. There's something else, Maya. Your mother asked me to set up a call with you. She wants to apologize personally and discuss how she can help fix the situation. She's also considering legal action against Danny for fraud and manipulation. The thought of talking to my mother filled me with complicated emotions. She'd been manipulated, yes, but she'd also created the environment where Danny felt entitled to make decisions about my life without my input. Her dismissal of my military service had contributed to the family dynamic that made this theft possible. I'll think about it. There's one more thing. I've been in contact with the Cedar Falls Police Department and the Iowa Attorney General's office. They're very interested in this case. Apparently, theft from deployed military personnel is something they take extremely seriously, and they want to make an example of this situation. Captain Chen's voice took on a tone of professional satisfaction. Danny's about to discover that stealing from a soldier has consequences he never imagined. This isn't going to be handled as a family dispute or a civil matter. This is going to be prosecuted as the federal crime it is. After ending the call, I sat in the desert silence, processing everything I'd learned. Danny's betrayal was worse than I'd imagined, but so was the response from everyone else involved. People I'd never met were going out of their way to help me recover from his theft, while military lawyers and civilian prosecutors were working together to ensure he faced appropriate consequences. My secure phone buzzed with a text from Rachel. Danny's freaking out, says some military lawyer is threatening him with prison. Can't you just drop this? He's family. Family? The word that had been used to justify stealing from me was now being used to pressure me into protecting the person who'd stolen from me. The expectation that I should prioritize Danny's comfort over my own justice, that I should let familial loyalty over both law and basic decency. I typed back a simple response. He should have thought about being family before he stole everything I owned. Her reply came immediately.
You're being vindictive. This is going to tear the family apart. I stared at the message, marveling at the twisted logic. I was being vindictive by expecting consequences for theft? I was tearing the family apart by refusing to enable criminal behavior. The family that had already been torn apart by Danny's actions, not my response to them. This time I didn't reply at all. Instead, I forwarded the conversation to Captain Chen as more evidence of the family dynamic that had made Danny's theft possible. The assumption that I should prioritize family comfort over personal justice, that I should absorb the consequences of other people's bad choices without complaint. 3 days later, I received a call that changed everything. Mrs. Henderson, the music teacher who'd bought my grandmother's piano, had done something extraordinary. She'd organized the other buyers into a coordinated effort to return all my belongings simultaneously. They'd rented trucks, arranged for professional movers, and were planning to deliver everything back to my house on the same day.
"We want you to know that not everyone in Cedar Falls thinks what happened to you was acceptable," she told me during our call. "Your service matters, and your sacrifice matters, and we're going to make sure you come home to your belongings exactly where they should be." The generosity and principle of complete strangers was overwhelming. People who'd done nothing wrong were spending their own time and money to fix a problem they hadn't created, simply because it was the right thing to do. Danny, meanwhile, had hired a lawyer and was trying to negotiate a plea deal that would keep him out of prison. According to Captain Chen, he was claiming he'd been trying to help me and that the whole situation was a misunderstanding blown out of proportion by vindictive military lawyers. But the evidence was overwhelming. The documentation of his lies, the witness statements about his aggressive behavior at the auction, the financial records showing where the money had gone, and the testimony from family members about his deception painted a clear picture of calculated theft. 2 weeks later, I received a video message from Mrs. Patterson. She'd filmed the delivery of my belongings, showing truck after truck pulling up to my house, showing neighbors helping to carry furniture back inside, showing my grandmother's piano being carefully positioned in exactly the same spot where I'd left it. "It's all back, honey," she said at the end of the video. "Everything's exactly where it belongs, waiting for you to come home." I watched the video 3 times, tears streaming down my face in the privacy of my barracks room. My belongings were home. Strangers had made sure of it. My military lawyers had fought for me. The legal system had protected me. Everyone except my own family had treated my service with the respect it deserved. Danny was sentenced to 18 months in federal prison and ordered to pay full restitution for the items that couldn't be recovered. Rachel received community service for her minor role in the scheme. My mother called me every week now, trying to rebuild a relationship that had been damaged not just by Danny's theft, but by years of dismissing my choices and treating my service as a phase. But the real victory wasn't legal. It was the knowledge that I'd learned to distinguish between the people who would stand by me and those who'd exploit me. I discovered that family isn't always defined by blood, and that sometimes the people who care most about your well-being are complete strangers who understand the value of service and sacrifice. When I finally returned home 6 months later, everything was exactly where I'd left it. My grandmother's piano, perfectly tuned by Mrs. Henderson, the dining room table, polished and cared for by the young couple who'd returned it, the hope chest, with a note from the elderly collector thanking me for my service and apologizing for his inadvertent role in the situation. Home looked exactly the same, but I was different. I'd learned that justice sometimes comes in unexpected forms, that kindness exists in surprising places, and that standing up for yourself isn't vindictive, it's necessary. Most importantly, I'd learned that the uniform I wore represented values that strangers understood better than my own family, and that sometimes the people who truly have your back are the ones who've never met you but respect what you stand for. 6 months after returning home, I sat at my grandmother's piano, playing the hymns she taught me as a child. The afternoon sunlight streamed through my living room windows, illuminating the dining room table where I'd spread out my acceptance letter to graduate school. The GI Bill would cover my tuition for a master's degree in nursing, and I had already been accepted to 3 different programs. Danny had been released on parole after serving 14 months. He'd written me several letters from prison, each one a masterpiece of self-pity and blame-shifting. He was sorry I'd overreacted. He was disappointed that I'd chosen legal action over family forgiveness. He hoped I'd learn something about the importance of loyalty from this whole experience. I'd thrown each letter unopened after the first one. My mother still called every Sunday, our conversations awkward but gradually improving. She'd started asking about my work, my plans for the future, my experiences overseas. Small steps towards treating me like the adult I'd become rather than the child she remembered. She'd also started volunteering with a military support organization, her way of trying to understand what service really meant. Rachel had completed her community service at a veterans support center, an ironic twist that had apparently opened her eyes to the reality of military life. She'd called me last month to apologize, not just for her role in the theft, but for years of dismissing my choices. Her voice had carried a maturity that hadn't been there before, and for the first time in years, our conversation felt genuine.
The doorbell rang, interrupting my practice. Mrs. Henderson stood on my porch with a plate of cookies and a shy smile. I hope you don't mind me stopping by. I wanted to invite you to our spring recital next month. Some of my students have been asking about the soldier who owns the beautiful piano they helped return. Over coffee at my dining room table, she told me about organizing the effort to return my belongings, about the conversations she'd had with other buyers, and about the community response to learning what had happened. You know, Maya, what your brother did brought out something ugly in your family, but it also brought out something beautiful in a lot of other people. Sometimes that's how we learn who we really are and who we can count on. After she left, I walked through my house, touching pieces of furniture that had been stolen and returned, running my fingers over surfaces that had been handled by strangers who'd chosen to do the right thing. Each item carried a story now, not just of my family history, but of human decency and unexpected kindness. My secure phone buzzed with a message from Captain Chen. She'd been promoted to major and was reaching out to let me know about a new position in military legal advocacy. They were looking for experienced service members to help other soldiers navigate legal challenges, particularly those involving family exploitation during deployment. The irony wasn't lost on me. My family's betrayal had led me to discover a calling I never considered. Helping other service members protect themselves from the kind of theft and manipulation I'd experienced, using my story to prevent others from enduring the same violation. That evening, I called Captain Chen back and accepted the position. Starting in the fall, I'd be working part-time with military legal services while completing my graduate degree. My experience with family theft during deployment would become expertise in protecting other soldiers from similar exploitation. As I hung up the phone, I realized that Danny's crime had ultimately given me more than it had taken away. It had taught me about real loyalty versus blood obligation. It had shown me that character reveals itself in crisis. It had connected me with people whose values aligned with mine and whose respect was based on who I was rather than what I could provide them. Most importantly, I'd learned that family worth having doesn't need to be convinced of your worth, and that sometimes the greatest gift toxic people can give you is showing you exactly who they are. The sun was setting through my living room windows, casting long shadows across the piano cues. Tomorrow, I would start classes, begin my new role with military legal services, and continue building a life based on my own values rather than other people's expectations. But tonight, I sat in my recovered home, surrounded by belongings that had been returned by the kindness of strangers, playing music on a piano that had been stolen by family and rescued by community. The melody was one my grandmother had taught me, but the harmony was entirely my own creation. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.